So let's call the meeting to order at 6:17 of the Washington Central Unified Union School District. Welcome, everybody. It's nice to see you all. We have a lot of our board members in person today, and one of our board members online, and some of our administrators are online, and some of our administrators are here. Welcome. Thank you for making the time for being with us. I'm going to jump right into the agenda with the hopes that we can end this meeting early today. And any adjustments to the agenda? Go ahead, Patrick.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about the communication around the budget to the broader community.
We have that as part of in our board operations. The annual meeting board roles would be it's part of that. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's move into a reception of our community members and guests. So we're going to open it to public comments for 15 minutes. So if you have a question or something that you want to bring up to the board, please go ahead and raise your hand. Same here. I don't see anybody. Wow. I'm going to admit this one person coming in right now. Okay. I don't see any. Okay, wow. Right, maybe we are actually going to be. I won't jinx it. Okay, so today is exciting because we have not just one, but two math presentations. I don't know if Dodi or U32 is going to start first. Oh, you're going to start first. So we were not able to look at Dodi's math presentation at Dodi because that day Gillian was unfortunately sick, but we're excited that we get to see Dodi's math presentation now. And then Becca is going to do the U32 one. Do you have something to share on the screen?
I shared it with Stephen.
All right.
All right, let's make sure that that'll work.
Do I have clicker ability, or do I have to
So
say
you're
next
gonna have
slide,
to
please?
make the beep noise. Yeah.
Okay, yes, so as Flor said, we missed the November presentation because I very cleverly spiked a fever the morning that I was supposed to do it. So we're a little bit late, but I'm excited because we have some winter data to look at too, so we can look at some growth, which is the fun part. I'm going to start with a little bit of a tangent. That's not, well, it is a little bit of a tangent, let's be honest. So Dodi went skating today, which was amazing. And the reason why I bring it up, because one of the things that we look at and we talk about in data presentations is we spend a lot of time looking at the things that iReady prepares for us, and the graphs and the this and the that. And there's all kinds of data that we look at and all kinds of things that we're looking at all the time that just give us information about what's happening with our kids and how are they doing and how are they progressing. And so skating today was super fun. And one of the things that was really great about watching it is we had a number of kids who this was their first time on skates. And we had a number of kids who are hockey players and figure skaters and are really experienced skaters. And one of the things that we observed as the kids were going around is the more skilled skaters were helping the less skilled skaters. Kids were constantly coming over and checking in on each other. And kids were falling down and getting back up and falling back down and getting back up. And every kid, one of them, got up one more time than they fell down. I was kind of out there on the ice, a little worried that there was going to be a puddle of child on the floor, and there wasn't. And I think what this speaks to is that learning isn't just about the content, because we cannot possibly teach students all the content that they need to know. We cannot teach them all the things that they need to know. But what we can teach them is we can't teach them how to take on challenges and how to work together when they take on challenges. And we can teach them how to get up one more time than they fell down every time and experience kind of like the joy of falling down, which I did not do, and I'm very glad because they are much more elastic little creatures than I am. And my whole staff was like, oh my God, you're going on the ice, Gilead. So, next slide, please. So the way I've structured this is one of the ways that I think about data, and I just think about sort of like bigger questions, is I go with the what, the so what, and the now what. So we're going to start with the what. So next slide, please. So this is an overview of Jody and our math teachers. What you'll notice is Sonia Rhodes teaches 3 grades, which gives us some lovely continuity through, and the number of students in each class. Next slide, please. Okay, so we just finished the winter diagnostic window, and one thing that iReady does for us is we can look at the most recent testing, but then we can overlay it with the previous testing too, which just gives us a visual of how we're doing. So in the fall, one of the things that you heard is it's really okay to see a lot of the kids in the yellow because this is measuring where they're at or where they're supposed to be at the end of the year. Excuse me. But what we see here, which is exactly what we want to see, is the yellow has gotten smaller, the yellow and the red have gotten smaller, and the green has gotten larger, which means that students have grown. So this is just what we want to see. And if anybody notices, the total assessed 63 out of 64. We had a student move in, I think it was November, and for whatever reason, this is what iReady does for us. It's the difference of the student. So if I could have the next slide, please. Okay, so this is what I did is I took, I just sort of broke it apart to make it a little more clear instead of giving you all the bar graphs so that you can see the black figures, the larger black figures are the current assessment data, and the smaller red is the fall data. And so what we're seeing mostly is we're seeing the data moving over to the left. The numbers are getting bigger over on the left and smaller on the right on the whole, which is what we want to see in the data. So I can give you guys a minute to look at that if you want, or all right, next slide, please. Okay. Yeah, ping. Okay, so this is our growth data. iReady prepares growth data for us, and what we want to see, and I'm going to be completely honest with you, this measure of the progress towards the annual and typical growth, there are those things, and this is one of the things that we teach kids about, is they're the things that you learn and you understand in the moment, and you have a really hard time holding on to them, and that's okay. And the progress towards typical growth is one of those things that for me is like, I know that I wanted to see 50%, and I saw 50%. So that for me is just like, oh, well, that worked. I don't have to understand really what it means. I know that that's where I want to be. One thing that I found in looking at longitudinal data is that oftentimes the trend has tended to be that we've seen more growth in the second half of the year. And one of the things that we've talked about as a faculty is thinking about, well, that's because the first 6 weeks of school in a responsive classroom model, there's still a lot of like learning how to do school and getting into math routines. So the kind of the juicier stuff comes later in the year. So, and then one thing is just looking kind of across the grade and just sort of looking at this and noticing this, that generally around 50% except for grade 4. But we're going to come back to that one. So next slide, please. Okay. And then another thing that we looked at is we just looked at what is the use of MyPath, which is the self-directed learning that teachers can set lessons for, and is also based on the diagnostic. It's a way for students to practice their skills. And so we're seeing that 69% of our kids are using between 10 and 50 minutes a week of the MyPath. Okay, so next slide, please. So one of the things that happens with Doty, because we're small, is I can't really show you disaggregated data because it's too identifying. So that's one of the things that's a struggle with a smaller school. One of the things that's great with a smaller school, though, is that it's not a lot of, you can really dig in and look at the kids sort of individually and figure out who's who and what's what and what's going on. So unfortunately, I can't really show you any disaggregated data. Okay, but I am going to tell you, though, that one thing that I noticed, and my staff and I talked about this today, is when I looked at our performance data based on those students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, there was not an obvious trend. So when I first looked at it, I thought, oh, look, the younger kids there's less disparity, and then it seems to grow as they age. Oh, nope, it doesn't seem to grow as they age. And then I looked at it also, well, what happens if I look at students who receive special education services? And then I was like, maybe there's a pattern there. And there wasn't. So it's a puzzle at this time. So next slide. So now, getting on to the so what. So next slide, please. So looking at data doesn't answer questions. Looking at data guides your questions. Okay? It tells you what to look for. What are the questions that I need to ask now that I know these things? So we, as a school, looked at the data, and some things that we came up with were we had some students who didn't do as well as we thought they would. When we look at their classroom data and their exit tickets and their formative assessments and their unit assessments, they seem to be here. And these were third graders. But then we looked at their MyPath, and they were over here, and we thought, or not MyPath, sorry, the diagnostic, and they were over here. And so that kind of raised the question, well, why? What's up with that? What is it telling us? So then you sort of pick apart a little more, like were there specific areas where they seem to be struggling? And so what that question helped us lead to is I'm going to get to that in the now what, actually. I'm going to save that. The disaggregated data, what that tells me when I looked at that, and it's so puzzling, is this is something to look at not the 2 weeks before vacation, when various plagues are circulating through the school and staff, kids and grown-ups are dropping like flies. But it says this really needs a closer look. Like, what is this telling me? How does this compare to previous years? Maybe looking at some longitudinal stuff. What do I need? What is going on with why does there's not a clear difference? It doesn't, the Doty data doesn't seem to be matching the national trends or even the district trends. So what's up with that? So it's telling me I need to look more closely, because whatever it is that's going on, it's not as simple an answer or a question as we thought. The other question is, what is up with the growth data in 4th grade? And that's a huge question, and so what that made us think about is, well, is this just a this year thing? Well, no, it isn't just a this year thing. So students who are currently in 7th grade also had really poor growth, not poor, low growth in 4th grade. Students who are currently in 7th grade had really low growth in 4th grade. Current 6th graders, lower growth in 4th grade. Current 5th graders, a little bit, not quite so much. So this is making us say not what is it about this cohort of kids so much, but what is it about, is there something about the math program as a whole? Is there something about the transition between 3rd and 4th grade, or the overlay, or just the curriculum itself? And so that also leads to the question is what's happening in the rest of the district? What's happening with the rest of the 4th grades? Next slide, please. So this is the good part, the now what? You've looked at the data, you figured out what are the questions that you're going to ask, and let's not admire the problem, let's sort of move forward. So how are we going to use this data to inform our instructional practice? So thinking about our 3rd graders who had surprising results on the diagnostic, we started to pick through them. The classroom teacher started to kind of pick through and look through and say, what is it about these kids? Why are they okay here and not okay here? These 3 students had significant health events over the course of the fall and missed big chunks of school, and missed some key instruction on just some basic skills. Makes everything kind of make sense. So now what are you going to do about it is one of the things that this is what My Path is about, is My Path you can have either have it driven entirely by the diagnostic and have the program itself dictate the lessons, or the teacher can set the lessons. So these students are just going to have some My Path boot camp. And it's going to be some teacher set lessons to just practice and review the missing foundational skills. Because while they're continuing to progress and understand what they're being taught currently, what the diagnostic showed us is that the holes that they had from the fall are not filled in. In terms of the 4th grade data, what we did is we had conversations about the content of the curriculum in 3rd grade and in 4th grade, and how much new material is added during 4th grade. And is one of the things that, one of the questions we have is one of the issues that we're running into is that for students who mastered the 3rd grade material as 3rd graders, and then we're given kind of extension and enrichment activities, did that actually cover things in the 4th grade? So are our 3rd graders actually, as part of their 3rd grade work, doing some of the 4th grade work so that then the new content, the new material that happens in 4th grade hasn't happened yet. So because they scored at a certain level on the fall diagnostic because they already had the skills, then there really wasn't a lot of room for growth. So then the question is, do schools across the district see this also? What is the district-wide trend? So that's something that I've put out to the other elementary principals and to Jen to say, what are other people seeing about 4th grade growth data? And like I said, with the disaggregated data that just was, quite frankly, puzzling, is I really need to take a closer look. That's the now what. And I need to look historically. And maybe sometimes things just kind of are what they are, and you just kind of say, well, this is what happened this time. I don't really understand this data. Let's wait and see what happens with the spring data. Does it align? But it's clear that there's just more work to be done. That's kind of the thing that's happening with that, because you're like, it's just weird. So I'll have to get back to you guys on that one. My apologies about the shortage of adorable photos. I was out, kids were out, teachers are out. So I guess time for questions and reflections, if anybody has any questions, or Michaelin.
When you say there's no pattern to the disaggregation.
Can you use the mic?
I don't want. Hi, Gillian.
Hi.
When you say there's no pattern to the disaggregated data this time, do you mean that you don't see a difference between the students with free and reduced lunch and those without free and reduced lunch?
I
Or
don't.
Is that what you mean, like there's
Well,
not
so
a
I don't
difference,
see what would match sort of the national trend is that students on free and reduced lunch perform less well than students not on free and reduced lunch. So with 48% poverty rate at Doty, you would expect to see that gap, and it's not there. And so when I looked sort of kindergarten, first grade, I thought, well, the free and reduced and not free and reduced lunch populations performed roughly the same. So then I thought, well, maybe it's sort of something that has to do sort of with younger students tend to be sort of more enthusiastic. Is there a point at which we're kind of losing kids? But then, so I thought, oh, maybe like roughly around third grade, is there a place that we're kind of losing kids? And, well, it dipped down, but then I think it was in fifth grade that it came back up again and was closer again. So I thought, it's just not, it's very hard to describe without being able to show you.
But I mean, one of our goals was to lessen that discrepancy, right? So
Right.
couldn't it just be that
It could be just that we're awesome.
that's
Yes,
what's happening?
that could be.
Maybe?
It could be just that
Okay.
we're awesome.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I mean, and that's one of the things also with thinking about the structure at Doty is because fourth grade, like looking at that growth data in fourth grade, Sonia Rose has taught fourth grade for years. She also teaches 2 other grades. It's not an issue of who the teacher is because her other grade, the other classes that she teaches, have consistently had on-target growth data. So it's something about fourth grade.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a question, or do you
Yeah.
have a question? No, you go first.
Did you hear back from the other elementary school teachers on their fourth grade experience?
I heard from I put this out about 2 weeks ago. So I heard from Jared at Callis that his teachers were having some wonderings around fourth grade, but quite frankly, it's before break. And it was kind of the thing like, ooh, let's look into this.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ursula, and then I have a question. It's not what I remember from Berlin, but at least go
I was
ahead.
just going to say, one of the
Chris?
things that Ed Quality had noted as a district-wide, because we look at district-wide data, is that fourth grade is a place where we see a struggle for our students. And so some of your wonderings have made me make notes on how we look at that and like track these students moving forward. And also future fourth grades to see if is it a fourth grade issue? Is it a developmental issue? Is it programmatic? Those are questions we should all be asking. Is it something else? But it's all something to look at. But yes, it was in our information from Ed Quality even when we talked about the math and reading.
Yeah, because that's the other piece to look at what happens in reading. Is there something that happens when you're 9? Oh, there's lots that happen when you're 9.
Yeah, it was hard to tell how the kids are doing, with the way that you were, at least for me,
Yeah.
it was confusing to understand how the kids are doing. So is it fair to say that the kids are not doing well because of how many kids we have in the class? And part of that is you can't share disaggregated data because, we have fewer kids. But how are the kids doing? Like just in
Oh, the kids
in
are doing
general.
well. In general, they're doing well. They've got the nice 50% growth. We've got many kids are moving up more into the green and the striped green, so the on-grade level or mid-grade level and above.
So the fourth grade is just an anomaly?
The fourth grade
or-
is, yeah, and they're
okay.
an interesting group because they score well, but they don't have growth. So that's one of the things that makes us wonder about whether or not it's something about the math program itself.
Was that what you were saying with?
Yeah, go ahead.
Was that what you were saying with like they're being taught the fourth grade content in third grade? And
Yeah,
that's
so
why we're
in
not seeing-
so for example, in third grade, you start working on multiplication.
Mm-hmm.
So for the students who get that, they start to work on increasingly complex multiplication, which gets introduced in fourth grade. So the students have already worked on some of those skills.
I was just thinking a lot about what you were saying about free and reduced lunch and the correlation between that and growth. And being a small school, I would hypothesize that there is some higher level of social emotional needs being met in the moment. I also wonder about fourth grade being a time where developmentally children are shifting from that kind of very concrete brain stuff to more abstract, being able to connect things together. So what I would find really interesting is social emotional data next to academic data, and just seeing kind of how they correlate, what you're seeing. Like, are they doing really well socially and emotionally during these years? And then do they have a tough year or a year of challenge or cognitive knots or whatever? I just think it's really interesting. I also think with a smaller group, the instruction just looks different. And I'd be interested to see how that instruction varies in a class that has 8 students versus a class that has 20 students. Not better or worse, but just, I think that it's really interesting to think about the size and how that shifts or changes the data and how the performance looks for young children.
Yeah, those are good questions, and that's exactly what it is. Those are what I like about looking at data is it gives you those kinds of questions and makes you wonder. And then you do have to go, I think even in one of our larger schools, if you notice this pattern in fourth grade, you have to kind of check, is this something about 9-year-olds? Is this something about us? Is this something programmatic? Is this something about SEL? Yeah. Diane?
And wouldn't it be that you don't disaggregate it in a large group like this because of confidentiality
Right.
and the ability, but certainly within your own community of your school?
Oh, yeah.
You're able to tease those pieces out,
Right.
and it informs you more.
Yes.
Go ahead, Zach.
Yeah, I also had a question about the disaggregation, because I know that differences based on economic circumstances are a huge issue for the district. I know that you did present some pretty small numbers looking at by grade. I know some of your grades are pretty small, different levels. With the entire school being split 50-50, I think it would be valuable for us to be able to see at least aggregated across the whole school. What is that difference? I know that a number of the other schools have presented that for us. I don't know what your IEP numbers are, and if that's also sort of taken together, if that gets to a threshold that could be reported or not. But I know that certainly for poverty, it seems like it's certainly both groups would be significantly larger than any of your classes.
Yeah. And I think I like what you said, Elizabeth, about trying to put the social and emotional and compare it to, and at the same time, after doing that in service and seeing the realities of our community too, that poverty is not a disability. So if any, so not treating it as a disability, right? That could be going on, but how are we as teachers meeting or raising the bar for the kids to having the same expectations, right? Because we shouldn't be having less expectations.
Right.
So how do we correlate that? Okay, any more questions? Otherwise, we have Becca. Drum rolling. Okay, thank you, Gillian.
I think somebody's pulling up to this to display.
have it.
Yes?
I have it, yeah.
Okay.
I was like about to share, so go.
Just-
You go.
chat beforehand. Okay, thanks. So before, this is very loud. Before we dive into some of the data, I want to note that U32 is in a different position than Doty, in that there is a lot of information. And so what I tried to do is take some of the things that I'm hearing from the board and from the community around where you're digging into equity data, particularly actually around the two areas that just got mentioned, students with disabilities and students who are classified as economically disadvantaged. I looked at other areas of disaggregation, but I think that those are important spaces for us to continue to mine. I'm going to start with a little bit of framing around how I think about data in sort of a layered way, how we're starting to move towards thinking about data and information at U32. We'll talk a little bit about a particular story of kind of that cycle of data and information and outcome. We'll look at some of the outcomes. Particularly, I'm going to dive into and look at 7th grade, which is a transition year, and 9th grade, which is a transition year. So I want to be clear that there are things that you could swim in data, and I'm not sure that would be the most useful conversation. So know that that's intentional. It's not like, oh, people are being left out, or I don't want you to see it. I want us to track very intentionally particular things over time, and right now that's not where we are, so I want to set us up to get there. Does that kind of make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay, and then talk about what are we doing to particularly dig into disproportionality data, which is part of, I think I've mentioned this, the first school board meeting I was at. You were talking about disproportionality in your equity indicators in particular, and my job is to help us continue to track those over time, and then to dive into what are we doing about that, okay? All right, I'm gonna go to the next slide. So framing the conversation, I tend to refer back to a book that came out actually during COVID, kind of post-COVID, was drawn on from this idea that oftentimes we're looking at really big data as our performance indicator, so state level, norm reference tests, kind of standardized testing, or even the layer we're going to look at now, which is sort of that map data of it's still pretty standardized quantitative data. And the place that we want to get is on the ground with young people to talk about experience and to think through with them, what might that experience look and sound like, because they really have a lot of information to share. So I want to acknowledge that we're going to stay at that map data level tonight, and that our goal is, as a school community, to start to get to how do we systematically think about focus groups, observations, in really intentional ways to get the voices and stories of young people in the room. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. You can pause me at any point if you're like, I'm not sure I'm with you. So just to give an overview, of U32 from a numbers perspective, we're going to particularly look at 7th and 9th grade. You can have the shocking moment of 12th grade. Everybody have it. It's there. I got it. Okay. There is a whole other conversation around that. I'm aware of it. We're talking about it. Yeah. I get it. Linnea can tell you about it too. Yeah. Yep. So shock out of the way, we're going to focus particularly on 7th and 9th grade. Next one. But I do want to start with a story, which is in the ideal sense, there would be one more layer to this story, but I think this is a great place to start. So, and Amy, who's in the room, set this up in middle school and went to teachers and said, so I want you to try this thing. I want you to go in and look at the data and information and choose a subset of students who you really want to kind of focus on. You want to do some focused work on. Use the system which we have, which is callback. And let's look at what happens when we call students back intentionally, we work on particular skills, and what are the gains and growth that we see. So out of 23 students, 8 students improved relative placement by 1 grade. And this was, I realized, Amy, remind me what the length was?
From the fall already to last.
So roughly a little less than a semester, yeah. So intentional overtime. 8 students reached or exceeded their annual typical growth. 2 students reached or exceeded their annual stretch growth. 9 students made 50% or more of their annual stretch growth. And 15 students made 50% of their or more of their annual typical growth. What no students did was decrease, right? Those are really impressive numbers and very intentional. And I think sometimes when we look at that big kind of level data, we forget that the intentionality with which we choose and then work with and see gains in students. So the next step that I would want to do, this is sort of a hint, is that we'll do together, is to say, what can we learn from the stories of those young people that can help inform us on what were the practices that were really effective in that space? And then how do we use their stories to inform our practice? And that's sort of ground level data, or street level data, okay? All right, so let's look at where we are. In 7th grade, so these numbers are pretty typical for us, that we see a pretty wide range. And I am keeping an eye on where we see 7th grade and grade 9 and what happens over the course of middle school that helps us get a little bit more evened out in sort of proficiency. These are the most recent the winter diagnostic results. You can note where overall grade level placement is, and that something happens in those 2 years, we suppose. What's not clear from this data is it's not kid-to-kid comparison. So what this is starting to prompt in my mind is we actually want to start to look at a 3-year growth trajectory in terms of performance year over year, kid over kid, so that we're comparing apples to apples and we can actually see what's happening. Right now, we just don't, that is not what is shown here. Okay. Next slide. So let's dive into 7th grade in particular. And one of the things we really target in 7th grade in some of our academic support spaces is really thinking about numbers and operations as the place where we're gonna kind of think about when we are looking at interventions, how are we going to help bolster some of those skills that students may be struggling with that can be preventing them from being able to be successful as they go on in mathematics? And so we target that kind of group that's 2 grade levels below, or more, to really think about how can we help support that group of students over time. Okay, so just to have in mind. But now I want to look at some of the disaggregated information. And this is where I'm just going to give you a moment to look. So we can see that we have some issues around proportionality or disproportionality with the performance, how students who receive specialized instruction or special education are performing in relationship to their general education peers. And we need to dive into that. And so I'm not going to present any solutions to that. I'm just going to present that we have a dilemma. You're going to go to the next slide. And then the other area that I wanted us to think through was when we think about students who are classified as economically disadvantaged, what are we seeing overall in particular? And so the same trends that you're seeing are the trends that we also see in the data and representation, and that we start to see show up in other ways in the equity data that we're starting to pull. So we are in a process as a leadership team of pulling together disaggregated data around our outcomes, our course enrollments, our graduation, and our experience of our 11th and 12th graders that we will then use as the kind of baseline piece of what are we seeing in those trends, and dig down into.
What are those in the middle, the all, the, what do they stand for?
Oh, sorry, number and operation, algebra, measurement, geometry. So those are the kind of particular things. And this piece says, this is the needs analysis. So this is the percent of students who are below grade level. So it's sort of a deficit, right? Like, we're not seeing the other side. Okay. So then I pulled this other piece, which is like a pretty significant difference in what we're seeing in terms of proficiency in our 9th grade versus our 7th grade. Again, I am not going to draw any comparisons that says 7th grade grows from 7 to 9 because we are not actually, that's not actually the data that we're looking at, right? They're not the same group. They're not the same cohort. So I want to be clear about that. But it does make me start to think, this is what we want to keep an eye on, is are we seeing growth over time? Okay. And the other thing I want to just note is when we look at that, what's happening here in terms of the domains, from my perspective, based on our curriculum, that makes a lot of sense. If we teach it, kids are learning it. Okay, does that make sense? Number and operations, measurement, going up. Okay. Next. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to look at, this is disaggregated by students with disabilities. And so again, this is not to paint like a doom and gloom picture, but we have a commitment to equity, which means we have a commitment to equitable outcomes for our young people. And I think it's important as a board that when we look at this information, we can say, like, we're not going to shy away from the hard stuff, right? Like, I'm not showing you the things that are not disproportional, right? Like, I'm not showing you gender. I'm not showing you. That's not what I'm showing you. I'm purposefully saying, like, we have to tackle some of the harder conversations. Go ahead. Interestingly, when we look at free and reduced lunch, or in this particular 9th grade class, we aren't seeing quite the wide range that we were seeing before in terms of disproportionality. Okay. All right. Next one. Okay. So we're doing the things, right? Like, curriculum associates came, they're working with the iReady curriculum. We're learning about how to look at data. And I would say that where we are right now, this level of disaggregated equity-focused data is really important. We need to both do, just looking at it and then doing the same things with young people probably isn't going to be the thing that moves the needle. We need to start thinking from that equity-focused lens of what is it about the experiences of the young people in our buildings that is contributing to where we're seeing disproportionality. And I am not going to stand here and pretend to have any of the answers around that, but I will say that I think we're ready to dive into that conversation in a deeper way and to explore where are there issues of bias or structure or other things that might be contributing to some of this. So next slide. To do that, we as a leadership team have started the first dive. For me, it's about building our capacity to look at disaggregated data around equitable outcomes, to define that, and then to be able to use protocols to start to set goals, particular to subgroups of young people, where we can gather more of that street level data. We can start to do exactly what Amy and the middle school folks did, which is to say, how do I create some targeted supports that are intentional and be a little bit tighter in my tracking of it, and then what does that show in our equity equitable outcomes as a result. So instead of just saying, this is great, kid by kid, this happened, how is that pushing us towards more proportional outcomes? Is kind of the next layer of that conversation. Okay, that's all I have for you. I know that there are no pictures. Will work. But and the feedback, other things, yeah, Diane.
One thing I was realizing is the reality of what like 49% means of that. You know, when you look at the numbers of those who are receiving special education services, it's a smaller number of total, and then as compared to not. And so then 49% in that is a different number of kids than in the other, than if it were in the other. And so to me, I wonder if it would be helpful at all to see the actual number of students in each of that, because then you see that like 49% can seem overwhelming to me, but if I see that it's maybe 8 kids that when we could do some intensive supportive changing how we do things might not seem as overwhelming.
So it's an interesting question around like, so sometimes I think, and please chime in, this might not be the correct thinking, it's totally fine, but I think like looking at that from that kind of, okay, so where are we seeing disproportionality overall? And now how do I drill down into that, into a particular subgroup and say, we could work with 8 students and kind of think about what are the moves we're gonna make specific in that work? What are the changes we're going to make specific in that work? And some of it is not then about tracking that kind of high level data again. It's again about that first story we saw, which is like, now let's look at what happened for each of those young people.
On a similar thread, when I think about the special ed group, I think about the kids that make up that group and where they are developmentally, and how that would change the data. And so one of the things I'm really interested in watching is actually the growth, as opposed to are they at grade level. Do you know what I'm saying? Because there's gonna be some kids who are in special ed who might not be at grade level for another year or 2 years based on their development. And so for me, I think a big indicator of how we're doing and the success that students who are in special eds are experiencing is that growth data. So that'll be really interesting to watch and see.
Yeah, in particular, I think too, where goals are.
Right.
One thing that I found really striking, especially looking at the 9th grade data, is how much the middle of that distribution just disappears. And I don't know if you had any thoughts about like, why are we, is there something that's happened as kids get into high school, or is it just that class that sort of, why is it that we sort of suddenly go to this pattern where kids are either really getting it or are really quite far behind, and not so many that are almost there?
Yeah, first of all, I think that question is actually like how do we watch it over time? So I don't feel great about speculating around that, only because we can come up with lots of theories, and I would like to see, like, are we actually seeing that as a trend? And we also know that as students don't get it more and more, and as they grow, that starts to be entrenched, or can be. And that, I think, is something we just need to watch for. So I appreciate the question and thinking about that.
Have these results held steady over a number of years?
Stephen, have these results held steady over a number of years?
Amy?
Amy, have these results? I don't mean to.
I really don't mean to push that to Amy, but Amy really has been looking at this data for several years. And I mean, the trends tend to be the same over that time.
Yeah, no, come close. Here it goes.
I told Amy I was not going to call on her tonight, but
Stephen
did.
That I did.
thanks, Stephen.
No.
No.
1 sec.
Use your inside voice. Or maybe your outside voice.
Am I on? Now
Yes,
I'm on. I can
you're
tell.
on.
In general, I would say yes, both in terms of differences in performance between students, and also I think the most pronounced kind of enduring difference is that in general, our 7th graders have performed not as well on this assessment as our 8th graders, which makes sense because when you think about everything that's happening for a 7th grader coming from our pre-K through 6th grade schools, that does make sense. There's a lot going on for them beyond their growth in iReady and their performance in one math assessment. I will say the other thing that we continue to want and need to talk about is forms of assessment that, as Becca was saying, are authentic and making sense for us as our kids progress through high school. Because you all, many of you have seen, for example, our VCAP scores, and you know that our 9th grade scores or even our 11th grade scores are not always representative, I believe, of how our students are performing. And so the idea that our kids may or may not be as invested in the high school assessment as maybe our younger kids, that's something that we're continuing to explore. And in conversation with students as well, I would say. I was just in a conversation yesterday about that, so yeah.
Yeah, and in particular, like I want to make sure that we don't ever say that students are invested, like they're clearly invested in their education, and this might not be the right match for the ways in which we describe their performance. Right?
But also, they're not all in like
Yes.
that class,
Yeah.
right? So they don't all have algebra and geometry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's part of why I say this might not be the best like we need to start to delve into what is the experience of our young person in that moment. What are they learning in the class that they're in? What's working for them in the class they're in? How is our curriculum aligning to the kind of measures that we're using? And frankly, to our SLOs, and making sure that those are all continue to be in alignment. Okay. I know that there's time constraint, so I don't want to.
Yeah, Chris, do you have a question?
Becca, can you tell me how you decided to pick Solving Disproportionality as the guide?
How did we choose that book?
Yeah.
I have used that I personally have used it as a text before with school leaders. And one of the things that I have found helpful is that it's pretty protocoled. And so it provides some of that structure for helping thinking about getting a little bit deeper into data. That's solving disproportionality. I would couple that with street data as sort of thinking about those two things together, and that's what we're starting to do.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I had a comment. Oh, go ahead.
I just want to say I really appreciate that you started the conversation talking about wanting to delve into street data, because one of the things I've been really frustrated with since I've been on the board is the focus on data coming from testing. And as an educator, I always hated using testing as a measure for figuring out where my students were, because I think there's so many other ways to measure how our students are thriving in our classrooms, and I think testing is probably one of the worst ways to do it. So I just want to say I really appreciate that that's a lens that you're really going to look more into, and I'm excited to hear more about that and less about testing data.
Me too. I have some more stories about that, but not for right now.
And I just want to say I really love the presentation, especially the case study of the 23 students, and how would that inform, what practices will be helpful, and really getting that student voice so that our teachers are able to meet 80% of their student needs, right? Especially in math, as we're trying to do it better. So thank you. Thank you for the presentation, and you asked the question, what are the implications for the board? So to make sure that you have the resources and we remove obstacles and improve our practices of monitoring or whatever it is, so that we can support the work that you guys are doing. So thank you. We are gonna open up to questions from the public too. So we have community members that were watching the presentation. If the board got to ask some questions, if you guys had some questions from either Gillian or Becca, you could raise your hands. Otherwise, we'll move right into our reports. I don't think I'm missing any hands, but I don't see any hands up. I don't see any hands here. Going at once, at twice. Becca, the other Becca, she's not raising her hand. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. So we have the superintendent, the COLT report, and we were gonna highlight a couple of things. I'm gonna pass it on
Yep.
to you, Stephen.
Yeah, we wanted to highlight just a couple of things from both the COLT report and from the principal's reports as well. And so I wanted to start off with Jen. Yeah, good, you still got your microphone. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. So I was asked to talk a little bit more about the DESA, or the Devereaux Student Strengths Assessment, which is an assessment of social emotional learning. And I want to say that the administration of this, and the timing's perfect. We were just talking about student performance and social emotional learning, and how those two things go hand in hand, and hearing from our students as well. So this has been in the works for quite a while. We engaged in some work related to social emotional learning way back before the pandemic, and had a steering committee for the district, and the pandemic hit. And to make a long story short, after a long time and through the values that were articulated by our community in our strategic plan, have implemented this assessment for the first time this month, right now. In fact, some teachers are still assessing. We're implementing it at the kindergarten through 6th grade level right now. It's a strengths-based assessment where it's a universal screener, which means in this particular case, teachers spend about a minute answering 8 questions about the social and emotional well-being of their students, framed again from a sense of strengths. And based on their responses, some students need a closer look. And so then they will spend a little bit more time doing a deeper dive into a particular student's. And they can start to see where students' areas of strength and maybe their areas of need might be related to skills like self-management, social relationship building, decision-making, self-awareness, optimistic thinking. I'm missing one, there's 6, and I just rattled off 5. I put it in the report for you. And that's all aligned with CASEL, which is the preeminent organization for social emotional learning in the nation right now. So that is happening, and I want to say that that's happening in part, again, because of the district's commitment to thinking about the well-being and growth of our children beyond academics. It's also coming from curriculum council or curriculum camp work that happened this summer, really cross-checking our social emotional learning expectations and our transferable skills, and then a subgroup of the leadership team coming together to figure out what exactly is it that we want and need in a screener. So we decided that what made sense for this year was to implement it this winter after some professional learning. So our teachers and principals have just engaged in some professional learning about what is the DESA, and then how do we make sense of the results and respond to the data, and with the eye toward implementing at the middle school and high school levels next year. The older kids also have a student survey that they will end up doing themselves. So they'll assess themselves. We'll have those results. We can cross-check with teachers and results and then figure it out. But it's a little more complicated to implement at the middle and high school level than it is at the elementary, where it made sense for the classroom teachers to be the ones assessing. So by all accounts, it's going well. We'll look at analyzing the data after the window has ended, which is Friday. And I would just commend the elementary principals and teachers for going for this. We said we wanted to do it in February. It's taken a while for all sorts of reasons to actually implement it. And I would say for you all as a board, ask us about the results. We'd love to share those results with you, and bear in mind that there is a cost. And so as we continue to implement, we'll be asking you to continue to resource this assessment for us, because it's not only the assessment, but then goes hand in hand with either Layer 1 general classroom lessons that teachers can implement, and some interventions for others to support when our students need additional support.
Thank you, Jen.
Yeah, so let's do questions first on the superintendent before we move to the principal's report. Is that okay?
Sure,
So
sure.
do you guys all had a chance to look at the superintendent report? Do you have questions? This is one piece of the superintendent report that we wanted to highlight. Do you have any questions? Go ahead, Diane.
So just a question about, and you hinted a little bit about it. I know that with having a social emotional screener comes that responsibility of response. And so is that part of the plan? Because it's also an implication for us as a board to be sure that we're providing the funding for support.
Yeah, and so there we are continuing to look at what we do in layer one. We looked at alignment between the responsive classroom approach, which is something that we've been committed to at elementary, and the CASEL standards, our transferable skills, and this particular assessment. They're all completely aligned. We've been, we haven't gotten all of our results yet, so we can't pour over and know exactly how our students are going to score, but we will absolutely report to you and let you know what we need and how you can support us. I would say the other thing I'd say that goes hand in hand is a commitment to ongoing professional learning. And our district has been selected to be a host site for responsive classroom training in August at the elementary and middle levels. So, which is really great news because sometimes that training is not so easy to access anymore. So hopefully we'll get plenty of folks who sign up. So we'll continue to engage in that as well.
Any other questions on the superintendent's, the COLT report? Okay, seeing none, let's move into the principal's report.
All right, so we were going to highlight a few things here. So we were going to start with Jared to highlight some of their HJC, Humanity and Justice work at Calais. He's online right now.
Yeah, he's coming. He apparated. Welcome, Jared.
I am. I'm making it. You would think I didn't understand technology. So we have at Calais, we've been working in the last couple of months with Shelley to really start diving into HJC. It wasn't something that when I got here, that we really had going, and we've really taken some time, myself and our guidance counselor, Ruth, to really work with Shelley and try to understand how we can make HJC work at Calais. And so we've spent a lot of time, real intentional time with Shelley, trying to understand more of what the HJC work is, understanding more about our building and how to best implement it here. And so we've kind of gone in three different ways in little bits. One way has been to work with staff. We have had Shelley come in and work with staff and help them just to understand more of HJC's role, what HJC's goals are, and those types of things. And then another has been with students. So Shelley was just in our building today during our guidance time, working with our 3rd and 4th grade class and our 5th and 6th grade class. And I sat in on the 5th and 6th grade class, and the level of engagement from the students was so high. I mean, at some point, Shelley had to go, I have to leave because you have other things to do. Like, she had to sort of pull them back. And they just really took to it. And it was fun to watch. It was fun to just sit there and listen. The level at which Shelley was working with them on trying to help them understand, who we are as people, as individuals, and why it's important to look for inclusion and those types of things. There was at one point she was doing a exercise of like, if you could do something at Calais, what is something that you would, really big that you would think about it? And of course it went to playground, because that's what you do. And she said, okay, we like playgrounds. That's great. And she's working with them. And then eventually she got them to start opening up about how you make that more inclusive. How do you make it accessible for somebody who had different needs, and what does it mean for this to be accessible to all people? And she was really having that conversation with them, and they were really getting into it. And like I said, it was fun to watch. It was great to know that they were getting into it. And I'm excited with where we go with that. And then the third thing we've done is I've tried to be real proactive with our parents in our community. I've been having it in our newsletter, and I've been talking to parents and things just about this specifically, and asking parents, in what ways do they want to be involved, and in what ways do they see what humanity and justice means here in Calais. And so I've started having those conversations with them as well. So we've really kind of just dived right in, and we've so far really enjoyed the work that we've been doing, and we're excited to see where it goes. Mrs. Eklund, our 5th and 6th grade teacher, I left about 5 minutes before they were done, and she came to me later and said, "Oh, they're already all wanting to bring in food. They got themselves on a supporting people with food insecurity. They even want to." The teacher brought up the film that we all watched at a PD, the Bess O'Brien film, and the students are like, "We want to see that." And so it just really got them. She's now challenged them to see if they can bring stuff in tomorrow, even. So I don't even know where that's going to go, but they were just so into it. And so I'm really excited to see where that goes. I'm thankful for the work Shelley's doing with us, and for our staff for buying into this and really just understanding the importance, and helping us push this forward. So it's going to be an exciting journey for us.
All right, thank you, Jared. So one of the goals of the Humanity and Justice Coalition at the district level is to have those committees at the school levels, and that's a lot of the work that's been going on this year, so that kind of highlights that work. Next, I want to highlight East Montpelier and Alicia's and the work that we did with Curriculum Associates, which is around our iReady program.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So last Wednesday, I had an opportunity to spend the day in the room that you're all sitting in right now with our district teachers. In the morning, our K-3 teachers spent 2 hours with a rep from Curriculum Associates, and then the leadership team came over mid-morning, and then in the afternoon, the district 4 through 6 teachers were there. And I spent the day with them. The sessions were broken up into 2 pieces, and I talked a little bit about that in my report to you. We looked at the data, which you've heard a lot about earlier tonight. I won't go into that. So part of it was looking at the data and thinking about some next steps with that. And then the other part of it was really kind of looking at the pacing guide and where each grade should be at this point in the year in order to get to the end of the year. And our teachers kind of looked at, like, where am I now? Where should I be? What does this mean? What are the most important things to teach? So that was how it was split. But I think that the highlight for me was sitting at the tables with teachers from across the district. In the morning, I was at the kindergarten table and had an opportunity to hear from other kindergarten teachers. And teachers could just share, what are you doing? What works? Let me see your data. Take a look at mine. Like, what parts of the lesson are you finding the hardest, or are you finding work really well for these grade levels? So the conversation was super rich, and I think our teachers really appreciated. This is the first time in a while that our grade level teachers across the district have gotten together, which was really nice. And then that's only part of it, because for me, anytime I participate in professional learning with my staff, right, the day is great and you leave and you're like, oh, these are good ideas, but then it can sometimes just fall flat. Or you can get back to the building and get busy and it's hard to come back to that. So this morning at PD, we brought it back up and we talked about it as a staff, and I kind of just surveyed them and, what was some new learning for you? What do you wish you had more time for? And how do we want to focus our attention when we come back together in March around, what we learned last week and around moving this work forward? So that was exciting. And I'm excited to continue that work in my building after that day that we spent together.
Great, thank you, Alicia. And then we're going to highlight, I think it was a sliming, Celia, is that the right term for?
The community engagement.
The community engagement piece?
You and I have no idea what we're talking about. We definitely don't. Yeah, so we had a part of our PBIS celebration. Our students filled two tubes. They're like these long cylindrical tubes that hang out in the front hall. And after that, I challenged them last week to a pause off challenge where students were given double pause for keeping, or they're like little poker chips in our building, for keeping their hands, their bodies to themselves, so being safe with your body, as well as being safe and respectful with your words. And the class that earned the most pause in a week challenge got to slime me. Yeah, Floor. Yeah, that's true. And it was really fun. The kids got really rowdy. I pulled a couple other staff members in, so there's some great photos that'll go in this week's weekly update. It was all edible. There was no glue involved, and I wore a shower cap. I told them all as I was putting my shower cap on, I have to do this because it's bingo night, and I'll ruin my hair with the slime, and I don't have time to go home and shower. So they were amenable, and it was just a fun way for us to celebrate hard work. We saw a pretty significant decrease in behaviors or even calls for support during our rough week. So it was fun and silly, and we haven't done anything like that in a while. So it was fun.
All right. Thank you for sharing, everybody. Any questions from the principal's report?
Okay, seeing no questions from board members, the principal's report is really helpful. Thank you to our principals, and thank you to everybody at the leadership team and the central office to putting together the COLT report too. We're gonna move into the best report, student report. So here you go.
Thank you. All right, how is everybody doing? Excited to be here. Lay's out sick today. He's not feeling good. He's got a cold. So just a reminder to wash your hands, keep yourself safe. On February 7th, we hosted students from all around Vermont and some kids from New York at the Winooski Valley Jazz Festival, which has always been a big hit. A lot of people enjoy it. Last Saturday, we were gonna host the Valentine's Day Sweetheart Dance, but it got canceled because of all of the snow, which we've been getting a lot of snow days recently. And then there's a thing on here that we're getting out the message about registering to vote. So specifically for seniors, just making sure, and anybody that you know that's of age, just really encouraging people to do that. And now for sports, my favorite part. All the senior games are coming up, which is super exciting, but also a little sad for some people. Tonight was the boys hockey game, and they beat Woodstock 7-1, which was awesome. And girls hockey is this Saturday. We play Essex. Boys basketball, their senior night is Thetford, which is tonight at 7. Was at 7. The girls basketball is playing Thetford also next week, which is exciting. Alpine, I don't think they do the senior things, but they're at Smugs next week, and tomorrow Nordic's at Craftsbury, which is States, which is super exciting. And then the Central Vermont Career Center, there's a tour or interview thing on Friday, which is also super exciting. And then school break next week, which is just great. Everybody's getting a break, rest and restore. All right, that is the student report.
Thank you. Okay, questions for our student? No questions, just thank you for being here with us.
Of course, glad to be here.
Oh yeah, gotta grab the mic back. Thank you for being here with us. Okay, so now we're going to do Patrick, the Vermont Career Center report.
Okay, first for the Career Center, reminder that if you're voting absentee, to request your Central Vermont Career Center ballot, so you can vote yes on their budget. But also, there are some seats for CVCC that will require some write-ins. So Washington Central, our at-large seat, currently doesn't have a candidate, and the Montpelier seat has a candidate, but he won't be on the ballot. Lyman Castle has been a longtime member of the board and is had to resign because he thought he was going to move, and then decided he's not going to move, so he's back in the district, but not in time to get on the ballot. So please write in Lyman Castle for the Montpelier seat. If I can get the spelling in the minutes, it's LYMANCASTLE for the Montpelier seat. And tell your friends about the Washington Central seat. That's what I have for the Career Center.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, so I'm going to give the board a 5-minute break. We have the VSBA report. You guys, Patrick, sorry. Daniel, you have a question for Career Center.
I was just going to ask if we could get a blurb about that to post to Front Porch Forum from you.
Sure.
About the absentee ballots.
Yep.
Yeah, and just a reminder, we don't endorse any candidates or any particular vote.
Of course
but
not.
We certainly inform the public of where they can vote. Keep us out of trouble.
So there's from the VSBA, there's a lot happening right now at the State House. It's pretty hard to keep up, as you guys know. We keep sending different links so that you guys can watch testimony. I'm hoping that everybody now, we had just one person that was not getting the updates in the board, as I understand it, but everybody else should be getting their updates, right, Chris? Yep. So it just keep looking at those, because everything is moving pretty quickly. A bill was introduced today. We are going to spend some time talking on an update on the context of the state. So I didn't want to take too much time right now on this. I was going to give you guys a 8-minute break to use the bathroom, and then we're going to try to dive into the rest of the agenda so that we're out of here pretty quickly. Is that okay? Yep. All right, because we have 2 executive sessions after, so take a break.
I'm going to cut my team loose.
Yes. Okay, let's get started so that we're not here too late. Okay, so we're going to start on board operations, and we had the steering committee and members of the board had asked to put a section on the context of the education right now. So we wanted to spend some time. So we thought with Stephen that we would start with asking what are the questions that are there before diving into, trying to give explanations. I know some of you are following it more closely than others. Natasha, before you do you have any questions? No.
I think what would help me is just, if you have questions, if something comes up in the news or you hear something, just send those questions to me so I can start to do a little bit of research. I will tell you this, I'm not going to go into every, rabbit hole, because there's a lot of them right now. But just if there's some big pieces that we pull out of that I can try to keep you informed on, or just direct you to where some of the resources are. There are actually some good resources that are out there. The VSBA is keeping track of those. And we have some of the reports that we get on education topics. There's also some good Vermont Digger articles that are out there about it. I know you try to keep up with that as well, but I just wanted to make sure that if you have a question or if something comes up, we can try to answer that. And I've been trying to dig into, one of the big questions that keeps coming up is around federal funding, how that might affect us. So trying to just gather a few materials around that. What I have seen recently is that title funds it doesn't seem, and this is always caveat is right now, it doesn't seem like title funds are going to be going away. If the Department of Education were not to exist, those title funds are actually predate the Department of Education and would probably be moved into other areas. They tend to have good, strong bipartisan support, so they tend to be things that will continue. Even when presidents say cut them, Congress typically raises the title funds just a little bit in budget season. So there's a general feeling right now that those are not going to be touched. However, there are certainly things that come up, and as we've seen, things change quickly. And so I'll try, if we do get notification that any of our funds from the federal government are cut, we'll inform the board as soon as we're aware of those things. But we haven't heard anything to that effect at this point in time.
Yeah. And I think everybody is aware of the two main pillars of the proposed plan by the governor right now. Like just to try to simplify it for people that haven't been following every testimony in the Education Committee, both at the House or at the Senate, is like, is both the governance structure, the mass consolidation into 5 districts, and then the thought about the foundation formula, right? I think that most of us across, we all understand that there's things need to change. Obviously, that there's improvements that need to be done into the how we fund education, but going into a foundation formula or this mass consolidation would just really serve to undermine the public education that we right now have in Vermont, and we would stop being leaders in equity and what having public education as a human right is, and it would not serve all our students, and it would actually open the door to privatization and choice, which is not what Vermont has been founded on. So there's a lot out there. I don't attempt to know everything either. Like I've been trying to follow as much as possible. We've been testifying. We're going to be there tomorrow. There's a lot going on. There was a bill introduced today. It's just in draft right now. I don't even have exactly who is submitting. It just happened today at committee. I have a draft, but I was trying to find out who did it, but it's literally in draft. It doesn't even say exactly. But so trying to come up with a counter proposition. The Vermont School Board Association Board met last Wednesday, and we filled a whole chart with questions and what our concerns are. Everybody has brought their support behind the superintendents. Superintendents had some thoughts about how to come into sort of not necessarily that everybody in the state is in agreement with all of the tenets of the superintendent's proposal, but it is a step in our best interest, a step forward to at least get into a better place of where we are right now. Ideally, if I had a magic wand, this would all just go back to the Commission of Public Education. That's why the commission was created. And we would focus on the bills that they passed last year, and make many of them, like really work on how we pay for education, on the BOSES bill, and community school. There's so many things that happened last year that we would be concentrated on. And the plan, lastly, doesn't address any of the cost drivers. Right. So, but we would, like if there's specific questions, we would be coming back up. Patrick?
Yeah, so there's a whole lot of maybe ideas in the material that we've seen reported, not a lot of details. So I just I don't really have a good understanding of kind of what some reasonable timelines are. Do you know, or what are some sort of realistic timelines given the draft legislation that you're talking about, or conversations in the legislation that may be farther along than other conversations? Like, are we in a world where some large consolidation might come down from the state this year, or is it like the next 5-year?
The timeline that they put in, Patrick, was 2 years, right?
Yeah, but I mean, realistic timeline. That seems bonkers.
Yeah,
but.
So there's a group that's working on the timeline now. There's a lot of cart before the horse things going on here, right? I would say that the bill that will probably be most likely to be first is the funding bill.
Okay.
And that's the one that I think as we start to see proposals that are in legislation as opposed to just on a PowerPoint, then that's where the board may want to review and have a response to as to, is this something we support or not? And I don't want to say that we should out of hand say we don't support any of them, because right now there aren't any of them, right? And so there might be a good one that comes along. Shoulder shrug, and so I think it benefits us to really keep an eye on that one right now. The configuration looks like it's going to take a lot more work, and there's very little legislative language that's there. There have been a couple of bills that have been introduced in a very draft form, and we have crossover not too long, and there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of bills that are in the crossover process right now. So I think one of the things to remember when we had our breakfast with our legislators, one of the legislators said that, this could drag on until July.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was an interesting comment that we'll see kind of how it goes. And I think my job is to just make sure that I answer your questions and bring you, when something looks like it may be headed towards a vote, bring that information to you. And you'll probably get it from the VSBA as quickly as I could bring it as well. So just keep an eye on those. That's the place. Those Tuesday emails are probably going to be one of our fastest sources of information.
Okay, thanks.
Fleur, would the VSBA provide draft language and get that out to us as well, as opposed to just a description of what the bill is?
We would get draft language to you when we have it. We don't have draft. Yeah. We don't have draft language right now. We've been trying to inform others. So our legislators have a little bit more. They need to take action. I'm like trying to be careful right now. So it's not all on the governor's hands, right? Like our legislators also have a responsibility to put out a bill, and I think that's what we're working on, is in informing that, and all of the associations and the NEA, everybody is trying to inform that process. So there's something that is based on data, right? So there's a lot of work that is going to happen in the next few weeks by different groups trying to inform, what would those regions look like, right? That is not just informed by just like, oh, let's pick the superintendent's regions, because that's one data point that doesn't really is who we are and represents our students or would be fair or equitable for the state. So right now, like Stephen was saying, there's a lot. It's like, to me, it's still a bubble diagram. They have presented some information. It doesn't really have legs. It doesn't. So they keep saying that is because of the Listening and Learn tour, but secretary hasn't been on the job longer than 6 months or 7 months. So it's not a long time for not really getting a picture of the reality of the state. So right now it's informed by the people that they have hired to do the work, and by the PICA's report. So we'll get there. We'll just continue to look, and if there's any call to action, please do something. Zach.
You asked about sort of what would we find helpful. I think one thing that I would find helpful is to get a better understanding of sort of what, when we think about the things that inform decisions that we make, to understand what a little more of the detail that's going to be affected by this. So the thing that I'm thinking of that sort of immediately jumped out at me was when the funding proposal came out, there was talk about how they're going to weight things like poverty, and the weights were different. And when I look at our weighted student numbers, I don't know how much of that weight is just the base number, how much that's the increase from high school students, how much that's from poverty, et cetera. And so having that sort of information, I think, if we do get questions, it may be easier to say, okay, like how drastic a change are we talking about?
Pretty drastic.
Yeah, so with the first proposal, I would say it's drastic, but we're also still trying to figure out exactly which weights there and how they're applying them are there. I've also heard that there's another proposal that's coming imminently. I don't know what that means right now. But yeah, I think once we have a chart of those pieces, I think that's something that definitely share with the board is, here's where we stand right now based upon the numbers of students that we had and the way we fund our school through our budget versus what it would look like on those foundation formulas. Mm-hmm. I can tell you that the first one posed is pretty drastic. It could, per pupil, it could reduce us easily a couple of thousand, maybe $3,000 per pupil, which that would be significant for us. And so, but I haven't heard any support in the community of people that are out there that says that this is the way they're going to go. So, but we'll get those charts to get as we can. I mean, it's happening fast, and then not at all in some cases.
And what we've been testifying is that they need to, use evidence-based practices in developing those base amounts, and also to go back to Tammy Colby's study, right? The considerations, we spent all that time through Act 127 last year. Let's just not throw it out the window, right? So use those weights and make sure that we are able to, continue to be leaders in equity in our state. But and then the other thing that base amount didn't have a projection for inflation, right? So some districts might feel like, right now, especially our districts that haven't been able to raise how much they spend, they were seeing it, oh, I'm gonna get $2,000 extra per student, that is a win for me, but that is, goes flat in a year or two, because it does not really meeting the needs of their students in that, and I'm talking like for Barry, our neighbors Barry, there, it would go up $2,000, and they're like, okay, that's great, because right now we're not able to do more than 11th, right? But it's not going to be, it's not based on the actual needs of their kids, So it's an artificial feel good for a year, might last, and then it just falls flat. So, but those are all good questions. Okay, to move to the next. Okay. So the configuration committee update, I'm going to look into Daniel. Do you want to do an update of the configuration committee? Yeah, I'm happy to do it, but I feel like there's got to be other voices in the room.
Gosh. Yeah, I guess I can do an update. One thing I would highlight is the progress we made today, reaching a consensus on a definition for configuration. And I think it's worth highlighting that this time around, I speak under correction, please anyone speak up who was there and remembers more clearly, but I think we're focused on an emphasis of program-based modeling and focusing on our programmatic goals and an evaluation of our existing configuration or possible different configurations are going to be evaluated in the context of that that programmatic goal and that programmatic objective. We have a really great new table of criteria that's much evolved from what we had the first time around. Much thanks to Keely for spearheading that process, and that criteria table is basically going to be the measuring stick by which we are measuring different types of models. So community input sessions on different types of models, so models related to transportation, models related to community schools, models related to, I'm blanking on the other ones. I think they begin in April, these community input sessions, and continue sort of on a monthly basis into the summer. So stay tuned for more information about how you all can join us.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay. Now we're going to move into the annual meeting board roles, which is really the communications for our budget and making sure everybody has the information they need for a budget. Our next community, not input, but it's our annual meeting, is on March 3rd. And what I was hoping to do is just have some new faces be the ones presenting the budget too. So I was wondering if there were some volunteers or if there are people that rather keep it as we had it the last time. And also what other ideas we have. And Patrick, this is where you get to speak to. The mailer has just gone out. So you guys should be getting it any time. I don't know if somebody has got it already. Oh, yes. Yeah, and then and the report is posted on the website already. So if you go to that QR code, it should lead you to the report. We put up a front porch message out. We have a communications committee. Both Elizabeth and Keely, as you know, have been helping us with that. I updated. I just always like move a little bit and add a little bit into that. So we're going to change the post that we just did this week to include everybody's taxes and be just a reminder of the March 3rd, and add the QR code now that people are getting their the trifold. So are the not the QR code, but the link to the place on the website, so people can also be seeing the report by another few posts. So posting more than once, because we find that by posting several times, people tend to see it. Patrick.
Yeah, so this is exactly what I want to talk about. I got the mailer, and I've been keeping track of what's on 4 Points Forum as a casual reader. And I don't have Facebook, but my wife does, and she is on follower. And I think that we need to simplify the message. I think we need to tell people what to do, what we would like them to do within the bounds of what our rules, right? But we need to give people action. We need to have a positive message about our budget. We need to be excited that this budget is going to enable our educators to provide our kids with all of the with the core beliefs, and to enable an education for our kids in our community. I don't see that in the material. I see a lot of numbers about what it's going to mean to your taxes, which is important to know. We need to be honest about all that stuff. I see numbers about the reductions, the decreases throughout the district, which is important, and we need to be honest about all that stuff. But this is not the time to hand-wring about the difficulties that we have in the hard discussions that we had for a year about this budget. We need to take this time to celebrate the good things that are going to come from passing this budget, and the support that this is going to have in our community to employ the teachers and the administrators and the folks that make sure that the buildings are clean and welcoming places for our kids. We need to celebrate all that stuff and be excited about it.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I think we know who's speaking at the annual meeting.
Yeah.
I'm happy to.
You have just volunteered.
I mean, this is out of the barn, and the biggest font on the front is our district. We know our district. We need action. We need to get excited about what we've got and the potential that we have here to educate our kids this year.
I nominate Patrick to speak at our annual meeting for sure.
Yeah.
I knew it.
Yeah.
I'll be there.
Okay, March 3rd. All right. Okay. So we'll add some of that to the message on Front Porch Forum. Thank you, Patrick. Any other questions about Diane?
So what it makes me wonder about is there like 3 messages that we're putting out? So the first one is a blast of excitement of the potential that we're creating. Then the next one might be, this is the impact on tax rates, this is what it looks like, and then maybe the third one is some of those other details, so that, and then we just do them in succession of that. That way they're shorter and they're highlighting some of those specific things, is what you're saying, and the first being the excitement of what we're providing.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think the takeaway needs to be support the budget, or what is it? We say that, yeah, support the budget, and so people know that's what we want, and that we are portraying, we're showing our enthusiasm for it with everything else that we say.
Yeah, we can say this is our budget and this is what our budget is going to do. We can't say support our budget, because it's like, vote yes on our budget. So, but we can say this is what we're doing and this is what. So that's
who can say
great.
Who can say vote yes on our budget?
Your spouse, your neighbor, teachers, kids, not you.
Can we have that? Can we have those people?
Support our schools, though, right? I mean, we can
You can say
support our schools, support our students, support our staff.
But the message has to come from
What happens
community
if
members.
What happens if I tell somebody to vote yes on their budget?
There's a public
no,
flogging,
it is,
Patrick.
it is bigger than that. Actually, it is bigger than that because you sign an oath, right? So you are not supposed to be, it has a specific name and it's going to escape me right now, but
Is that only
he's the
using
lawyer.
resources to support the budget? And if he's on his own, even if it's a school board
even
member?
as you're as a single school board member.
I mean, that would be like a politician saying, don't vote for me.
Yeah.
Or don't, you know, you
But
can't,
that's-
can't say vote for me.
Yeah, but that's different. They're not, not public money, right?
Right, I mean,
Well,
Patrick
that's what
can.
I'm saying. This is a public comment.
No, it's,
We are still
So
resourced
servant.
by this district.
Yeah.
All of us are a resource of this district. We cannot tell them how to vote. We could certainly go, I would really like your vote towards me as a board member, or I would love your vote towards the budget. I can't say, please vote or please support. It's too much of a take this action. I think Patrick has the right idea. We definitely need to have the enthusiasm of this budget is going to bring our students what we need and educate our students. I also think that there should be some excitement for the fact that we have attempted and we've come at this budget from a new direction, and we built
Yeah.
a brand new way that's going to help us move into the future in a way that's sustainable, right? Like we're looking at our student needs and meeting student needs and not just what is the bottom line. And so it's still very student centered. And I think we need to let people know that.
Yeah.
And I think that our enthusiasm can let them know how they might want to vote.
Yeah.
But we can't tell them to.
Yeah, in other districts, the PTNO, for example, in Montpelier, the PTNO puts like, different people stand in the corners and they hung, they either have big signs and people hung to them and they do, but it's through the PTNOs, it's through community members.
Okay.
It's not through the school. So there are ways to do it. So like Linnea is helping us with students, making sure that they are registered to vote and that they so the most important thing really is to get people to the vote because it's vacation week. A lot of people leave, so reminding it goes a long way. Just reminding your friends to vote.
Yeah, I would say we
Because
looked
that's
at the
the
voter
biggest-
data from last year to see who voted, and if we can get our parents to vote, then I think we would do really well. And they did not vote, in a high percentage, and so I think that that's one of the things. If you can just encourage people, at the bus stop or at the drop off or things like that, to make sure that they vote. Then that's going to be a positive for us in the long run. And so I think that that's the message that we want to make sure that we're sending as well, is that, hey, support your schools, get out and vote.
And we need to remind them to ask for their ballot too. We got one email. It's not a lot of people. We got one email from East Montpelier, and people were upset that we were not mailing the ballot. Like they got their auto ballot and didn't get the school ballot, and now it's like, oh my God, now I have to register. I have to request that. Why? They thought it was us that didn't want to do it, and it was just like, no, like we wanted to do it, but we had to have everybody agree to send them in order to send them. So they were expecting it. So the more that you can talk to your neighbors, that's great. Zach.
But I think we also, sort of on the voting thing, I think we do need to, it's a fine line between sort of saying, oh, blame somebody else, but also to explain factually what happened.
Oh, yeah,
I think
yeah.
people don't understand. I haven't seen a lot out there that's saying factually, this is what happened. This is why you're not getting a ballot from the school. I'm seeing you can request it, but not the why.
Yeah. It's, I've got to say I want Berlin and Middlesex to do it next year, so I'm trying a very fine line here. So I think it's more important to get people to the ballot and not dwell too much in, I can talk to you later, but the most important thing is to get people to vote, because if they don't, I don't want to blame any community for not being able to do it. We were not able to get them there, and we have worked for years to get them there, and hopefully next year we would get these other two select boards to agree to mail in the ballots. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
To piggyback a little bit on what Patrick said, when I think about the budget and how to support the budget, I think one thing that would be really helpful, and maybe it's in a blurb and we can talk about it, but the idea of with the support of the budget, we can do this, or these are the things that we're able to do, or last year we were able to do this. And I just think there's a lot of really wonderful things happening in our school at a micro level that aren't always evident. And I think if we can find some little tidbits or stories or case studies, kind of like what Becca did tonight, I think that would be really powerful. And maybe one comes from each school or something, but I just think to make it more connected to the people that it's impacting would be really, really important.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move us to the Finance Committee because we just have one action item, and I'm just seeing the time. So could I have a motion? It's on page 12. Ursula, are you going to move?
I move that the board authorize the superintendent to sign the contract with WF Project Inspection for his services as owner project manager and clerk of the works through February 9th, 2026, not to exceed $57,287.
Second. Okay, so second by Elizabeth. You got that, Lisa? All right. Any discussion, any questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Michelle. Be a good one.
Yeah, I got my mic. I'm assuming that this is the last year for this contract?
Yes.
Because I know during our budget discussion, this was said that we were cutting this position?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that
Yes.
this was the last year for this contract.
Yes.
Okay.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move into the Policy Committee. Chris?
Thank you. So tonight we have two policies up for consideration. The first one is our sanctuary schools policy, which is a new policy. And it is one that the Policy Committee is going to ask the board to actually adopt tonight on a somewhat of an emergent, what?
We won't be able to adopt it, but go ahead.
Well, like we have done before with other situations where we adopt it and then come back and reconsider it at the next go-around, so that's going to be my request. But I'm going to ask Natasha to introduce this policy to the board.
Thanks. So this policy is, as it says, to ensure the safety and resources for families impacted by immigration enforcement. It's really to make sure that the procedures that have already been put in place by the district to help advise our staff on how to address if ICE or other enforcement come to the building, what that looks like, but also it's a commitment to making sure that our students and their families are protected and feel safe within the context of our district. So that's essentially what this sanctuary school policy is our commitment to those families and students. And that is why we would like to use the same process with this that we did with the policy around creating learning environments that allow for civil discourse. We think it's important to get this in place as soon as possible.
So I think the only question I want to ask, we sent this policy to our attorney for review, but they were not able to get back to us because we just sent it literally today.
Mm-hmm.
So they were not able to get back to us until Friday to look at the policy. So if we could wait, we can do the first reading and then just wait to see if there's anything that we need to adjust on the policy. We have in process, like Stephen has been put in, I'm not gonna fight this, it's my people in essence. I just brought them to get some food right now. So it's not wanting to do it, it's just being careful. And really, are we doing this for them or are we doing this for us? We have a humanity and justice statement. I worry about three things. Polarizing we are lucky here in the board, but that is not our entire, I'm very familiar with our dairy farms, our owners of dairy farms, and how it actually operates. So are we doing that for us to make a statement, or are we doing it for them? Because we have procedures in place that wouldn't allow the ICE agents to come in, right? And we have been committed to all the equity of all of our students. So I just want the lawyers to be able to the advice that had been given from me, national and internal, is that we, just labeling a sanctuary school doesn't solve it, right? What we want to do is protect our students and make sure that our students are receiving the services, that they feel safe. So I think we just want to make careful that we look at ways that we're not going to click any federal thing that we would be non-compliant, and by doing that, we would be doing more damage to our kids than by passing the policy right now. So that's my argument. Go ahead. Diane has her hand up too.
We didn't go into this frivolously. This is not performative. This is because we want to ensure that our families and our students and our staff are going to be protected. To the language from this, it's very similar to the language of the policy that was just passed in Winooski. I'm sure they went through the same process of talking to their legal. It also has been looked at by various organizations, including legal organizations. It's language that's come out of NEA. Their legal department has looked at it. So it's been vetted by a number of different organizations, legal people, and also a policy that's already been adopted in another district in this state.
I would also just like to hear it from other board members first before I respond to Flora's concerns. Any questions about the policy?
So my question is about, so Flora, you said we already have certain policies in place. And so
Procedures.
Procedures in place. So I just want to play that out a little bit so I understand better. So should we get a call from immigration and they want to come into our building, do we have a procedure that does not allow them in?
I'm looking at Becca and Steve.
Yes. So we have distributed to all of our offices and the people who would open a door, what our process is.
What is the process? I mean, I'm
so we're not going to share our processes in open session.
Okay.
But suffice it to say that everybody knows what to do, so that they keep our students safe.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just a point, if we could, if to take Flora's point, that we have sent it to the lawyers but haven't heard, could we vote on this policy with the understanding that we would take legal counsel and their edits into consideration in the future?
That is what we could do that, certainly.
We could do that.
Ursula?
So in a lot of our other policies, we have a whole cross-reference section that talks about policies that it might cross-reference or come up against. It also talks about other legal issues and precedences. We don't have that on this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, if we have procedures in place, are they there because they came from other policies? And is there a cross-reference issue? I'm not able to go and look at it unless I sit down and read all of our policies. So I'm curious, the procedures that we have in place, without outlining what they are in open session, did they come forth from other policies that we have in place that we could run afoul of contradicting ourselves potentially? And have we fixed that?
I don't see any contradiction in this. I would say that, yes, our procedures always follow our policies and the laws as they are written.
Right. So I would like to be able to see those, right? That legal square that we typically have at the bottom of our policies that talk about the legal. If this is a policy that's trying to codify process that we already have and procedures that we already have, which we've talked about plenty of times, I want to see that we're referencing those things too.
Okay, we can do that. We can do an amendment and bring it back next time. Michaela.
I feel strongly that
we should consider passing this tonight with whatever contingencies are in place to look back at it in 3 weeks. We don't meet again for 3 weeks. And I am privileged to not be impacted by these potential realities, but I imagine if I were someone who could be impacted, it would be really scary times. And I would feel really well supported if the district implemented this policy rapidly, because 3 weeks, a lot can happen in 3 weeks.
Any other comments, questions on the policy? Elizabeth?
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed about the policy is that it talks about additional supports for families, and it kind of goes into things like available in-language know your rights resources, those types of things, and that it establish itself as a safe place to seek help, assistance, and information. And so I think that, to me, is a really important part of this policy. And again, going back to the procedure conversation, I guess what I would want to hear more about or understand more about, and I can do the homework, is how the two kind of interact with each other. And if we are already providing these resources to families.
So we provide resources to all of our families around a variety of issues, not just this. So I would kind of say that we have good, strong school counseling departments. Our administrators are aware of the rights. We have a social worker here at U32 that would connect people to those resources. And I would say it's not just immigration resources. If a family were to request that, we would also typically point them to the outside organizations that are much stronger with those, and we do that with a variety of things. That's why we have partnerships with so many organizations throughout our community. And so I would say that just like anybody in our district who would come to us and ask us for support in some way, we're going to make those supports available to them either through the school or by pointing them to the resource outside of the schools. Mm-hmm.
So unlike the prohibition on asking for vote for passage of this policy, I mean, unlike the budget, I'm going to ask that we pass this policy now and then make any changes to it later that we need to. We are living in an unprecedented time in terms of our power dynamic at a national level. I can understand concerns about not wanting to put your head up and maybe be noticed, but this is about safety for our students and making a stand and making a statement in a very cohesive way, which reflects our values as a school community. So I would hope that we would pass this policy as it is now and come back and make any changes that we may need to, because this is an unprecedented time in my view. Any concerns that Flora has or the lawyers have about some of the legalities of this particular policy, we can fix. Thank you.
So can I propose a motion for you that we pass the policy contingent on legal review?
I'm going to ask that we adopt the
Adopt
policy
the
as
policy.
is, and if we need to amend it in the future, I'm not going with the word contingent, because that would mean if the legal views came back in a way that it wouldn't go into effect. So with the motion that if we need to amend it in the future, we will do that to address any legal concerns that our council may have. Daniel? Oh, no, he had a question.
I was just going to suggest we alter the language where we adopt it and also solicit that feedback.
I think we already have.
And not necessarily, like, I guess the language you suggested sort of assumes amend if necessary, and that feels redundant, I guess, to me to say that, because we can always amend any policy, right?
Right. But if the council came back and said, you really need to fix this in order to make it a stronger policy from a legal perspective, that would be a necessity. And you're right, it's a caution. Still, the if necessary is cautionary language. But you're right, we can amend it at any time, and so it may be redundant, but
Any other question? Pat, sorry, Zach.
Would it address the concern better to say we're going to adopt it tonight and put it on the agenda for the
Yeah.
next meeting?
Yeah.
To, to sort of have a plan, a pre-planned check-in in case there are, further amendments that need to be taken up at that point?
Yeah,
that can, absolutely.
I like that. I guess the other piece is what Ursula brought up, which is that matrix of affected procedures.
Mhm.
So I don't know if we move to approve and basically redirect it to the policy committee, and once the policy committee has an opportunity, or the administration has an opportunity to name those procedures affected, it comes back or something.
Yes, I would suggest that we go and address Ursula's concern to cross-reference other parts of other policies that are incorporated here in this policy. Okay? Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Was there a second?
There was another, yeah,
Second.
Michaela
Oh,
seconded.
okay. Yeah.
You have it? Okay, so you were gonna have to say it again because you moved it from, yeah.
I have that you ask the board to consider passing the policy now and then coming back at a later date as needed after legal vetting. And then someone else suggested adopt the policy as it is. If we need to amend in the future, we'll do that to address any legal concerns.
So let me make a clearer motion. I move that we adopt the policy to ensure safety and resources for families impacted by immigration enforcement and put it on our agenda for our next meeting for additional consideration, but that we adopt it tonight. Okay.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay. There's one more that you have
Yep.
in there.
Next up is our possession and administration of emergency and non-emergency medication. This is a policy that we are adopting from the VSBA, I believe. There's a new policy, and it would be a replacement policy for what we currently have in place. And so this is a first reading.
We should repeal the other one as well, but we'll have to,
We can-
we'll have to warn that one.
We can do it, well, we're just first reading tonight.
Perfect.
Okay. Any questions on C71? Ursula, that's a recognition for you.
Is the policy we're replacing also C71?
No.
No.
No, I'm sorry, I don't
Did
have
we
that.
include it?
There is no C71 at this point in time. So it's a new policy that replaces an older policy in the piece. I'll have to look and see which
Yeah,
one that is.
I'm looking
I forget the
through.
number.
For the next packet, for the second reading, can we have the old?
Yeah,
policy?
want
we'll
the
have to
old policy,
repeal
okay.
it at that point, yes.
Yeah.
Patrick?
Page 17, paragraph numbered 1, it says emergency epinephrine may be given to by a school nurse or person designated and trained by a school nurse. There are a lot of ways to get trained to administer epinephrine. Is it required that the nurse is the person that trains them, or can they get trained by someone else and then be designated by the nurse?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't know. I can check into that for a second reading.
You know, maybe we're looking to see if it would be, whether it would cause any obstacles.
Yeah.
In terms of, it seems to me that having a nurse do the training would be a ideal situation, in my view, just, anyway.
Versus training versus certifying that they're trained may
Yeah.
be a difference, yeah.
Yeah, because you can get certified, you can be an EMT and be trained as but do you need to get retrained by the school nurse or just like be? Right. I think
Okay.
nurse.
I'm going to go just down the road. Elizabeth?
Yeah, on that note, for pre-K specifically, pre-K teachers are required to be CPR first aid, and they have to be able to administer epinephrine, so you may want to make sure that there's something in there that either as a school district, we agree that preschool teachers can administer it, or we need to have something in there that addresses that, because that is part of the requirement through licensing regulations. So they would already come trained to be able to do epinephrine administration.
Okay,
And
so-
actually albuterol or asthma sprays and things like that as well.
So now I wonder if we broaden that phrase to include what a pre-K teacher would need, because if it's good enough pre-K, it should be good enough for everybody. And so
Right.
if they meet that criteria, that should maybe address it.
But I think it changes the wording. Yeah.
It would change the wording, yeah.
It would-
Yes.
I don't think you have to specify. I don't think you have to
No, I
specify
agree,
it.
but just
Yeah.
use the criteria for that a pre-K is already required to meet. Okay.
Right.
That's good.
SEC,
Yeah.
and then.
I think, a general theme here, I think, is you want epinephrine to be as available as possible. This is a drug where if a kid doesn't get it, they're gonna be dead in a matter of minutes. And so we don't wanna have barriers for this.
Okay. Do we want to, do we want to single out epinephrine or just have that barrier down for most emergency type medications?
Medications.
Okay.
I would defer to McKalen on this, but I will say that as a camp counselor, we were basically taught to lie about epinephrine administration in order to do it when it wasn't legal, because otherwise a kid would
Yes.
die.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there are a lot of other drugs like that.
Okay, so we want to be really careful that we don't say that any of our people are lying about the administration
no,
of
no,
emergency
no.
drugs. I think what's more important here is the procedure behind this needs to be really well-established so that we make sure that and we've had this comment before, is making sure that our staff is trained with AEDs and, you know, a certain number of CPR. So it's not just pre-K, which have a requirement already, but that our staff as a whole. And we actually do some of these things. We did bring this verbatim from the VSBA, so it is vetted by, you know, before it gets to us. But, I mean, I can understand the concerns.
Steve, I wasn't suggesting it was.
I know.
I was trying to make the point that this is
Yeah.
this is a fairly unique situation. It's a situation where you need to make sure the training is really, you know, if you're gonna say we need to have training, that it needs to be very widely available.
Okay. Ursula?
I was also just going to point out that number 4 of that whole section also allows the students to self-carry. So that provision is already there. I did question number 3, other than emergency medications authorized by the Commissioner of Health. I'm curious what that list of medications is. There are probably a large number of rescue medications for other things. But I assume that's something that would be available for parents to find or to get if they talk to the school nurse.
I would imagine so.
Okay.
And the policy that came to us was, it really kind of focused on emergency medications, and we expanded it to have non-emergency medication as well, even though the language itself kind of hinted at non-emergency medication, but we just expanded it in the title. And Ursula, the prior policy was C30, Floor pointed out. So it's C30, and we'll bring that back next time.
Which was like a paragraph
Yeah.
before, and that's
It's
why
really
it
short.
a change.
Any other questions on this first reading?
Policy on CPR and AEDs? No.
We do not.
Okay. Okay, well, similar to those, obviously, yes, someone trained should be the first person, but I don't think in an emergency,
Right.
like, you know, you do what you need to do to save a kid or an adult or whoever, so. I mean,
And
I
I
think,
think
too, you know, the point made down there, like,
So I think the training part
we're
is
not saying,
the standard of care, not an emergency.
Yeah.
And if there's an emergency and no one was trained,
Right.
that whoever it is going to get the epinephrine.
Exactly.
You know, it just,
yeah.
because to take Zach's point, the consequences are drastic. Anyway. All right, Donna.
I think this goes back to, and I think somebody already referenced that beyond the policies, we need the process or the procedures. And that's what's going to be critical, because we've reduced the number school nurse, the FTEs. And so it's going to be critical that if we adopt this, then we also make sure we have a very intentional procedure that's well-known to moving forward as well.
And to build on that, that also includes the training parts, because it's a short training, but we could offer that to everybody.
Right. So I want to speak to this as just from when I was a teacher. If I had a student in my classroom that had an allergy in which they carried or required epinephrine, like I had to be trained as that teacher. And so the nurse gathered all of those teachers up that this student may have, or any student may have, trains all of us, and you had the little dummy thing that's right. And so we had to do all of that. So it is the practice already. This is just a change in the policy that we're addressing here. So, and there are multiple people within a building who are trained in the emergency use of an epinephrine, not just the school nurse, but administrators and the like. So I kind of want to put everybody at ease here, is that this isn't the policy that is going to suddenly make us learn this stuff. This is common practice. This is really about making sure that we have a process by which the parent notifies us, and that we are keeping track of this and who's got the medication. Because there actually isn't a policy around that. A kid could come in to the school with one of these emergency medications, and we might not know that. And so this is incumbent upon us as getting the word out to all of our families and making sure that they fill out a form, and that we have that training there. So I just want to make sure everybody at ease that we do have people that know how to deliver life-saving medication should a student require it and need it. So, yeah.
Okay. Ursula.
So since you're looking at this to be an emergency and non-emergency, I think some language needs to be looked at, like specifically around number 2, because that's the one that talks about having the written permission from the parents and a physician. And, like all of the people have to give the permission and send it in writing to the school. And it pretty much goes in an emergency, what?
The physician part is taken care of, but the parent part, yeah, that's challenging.
I mean, we have the forms in place. I know we do, right? But that paragraph specifically states in an emergency medication. So if we wanted to also cover non-emergency, we should probably make sure that we state that if we're replacing policy C30. Just to cover emergent and non-emergent. Check your language.
Okay.
This is just first reading.
Yeah, it's just first reading, so you guys can brainstorm it in the.
Michelle has her hand up.
I know just from my past here, like the registration forms ask for, can we give Advil, can we give Tylenol, Calmine lotion, things like that. Other schools have allergy medicines on it. And that is how that's how a lot of schools get that parent information, is that way. Because schools don't carry a lot of non-emergency medicine in their cabinets. They have certain things, and that's it. And we don't necessarily want students just bringing in random stuff that they're not telling us about. They do it. I'm sure there's high school students who do it, but yeah.
Okay. So we will bring this back to you at our next scheduled meeting. We also have a resolution, but in the interest of time, we're going to put that over to our next meeting. It is a compilation basically of many policies that we already have in place, the resolution that was part of the packet. Okay? Great.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 executive sessions today, so I want to move us a little faster.
We had one.
Do what? Oh, yeah, we have now
Chris, what happened with the resolution?
I said we're putting it over to our next meeting in the interest of time because of all we have on the agenda left. And I pointed out that it is a compilation of many of the issues, many policies that we already have in place.
Okay, I mean, I would prefer that we move on it tonight, and since it is a compilation of, since it contains things we already have in place, it shouldn't be a big discussion. It should be kind of a no-brainer yes, in my opinion.
What's the sense of the board? Do you want to move on this, or do you want to? Show of hands, please.
Okay, so just move the motion.
Okay,
Move
let's make a
move the
motion.
motion.
The resolution is Washington Board of Education resolution. I hope you've all had an opportunity to review it. I move that we support this resolution. Is there a second? Okay.
Thank you,
Julie,
Julia.
thank you. Any questions?
Discussion?
No? Okay, all in favor?
It-
Oh, sorry.
Julia. Hold your horses.
What?
Yeah. Do you have it, Liz?
Yes, you
Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay.
Okay.
Negotiations Committee update, Diane?
Yep, we met on Monday. Graciously, the association did meet even though it was a snow day, so we were able to get the first bit of the planning around the matrix. We've gotten it broken down into potentially 4 meetings, of which then we will come with a report of potential recommendations of a new matrix or not, with pros and cons that we will bring forward by the end of this school year.
Okay. Transportation Committee?
Yep. So we met on the 12th. The one thing that we really felt like we needed to share with the board is the ridership for the district. We have about 1,080 students who have signed up for busing. And I think it was over a 3-week period that the school shared with us that we have less than 500 students riding our buses. That's, so we have a lot of empty buses out there.
Is that on a given day, or?
This was 3 weeks of an average out.
Student who signed up never rode in those 3 weeks?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't know the students, but that's still, if you have 1,000 students, that makes the routes really long because the buses have to go that way, and they're not riding. We did talk about, we know there's signups and having stronger language about signing up. Like, it's not for the one day of the school year that you need a bus, because that's what happens a lot. But that was our big takeaway. It's about $80,000 per bus. So $160,000 a day for one bus, because it's the high school and the elementary school. So those are just things to keep into consideration. And we'll take any direction that happens to come from the configuration committees with what they want to know about busing.
Thank you.
It's still 50%.
Rock on, Amy. Okay, moving right along. Oh, go ahead.
So, besides Amy's, I love that ringtone, but anyway, so are you requesting, is the committee looking into what's the barriers to the other 580 that are not riding? And in terms of that, because I don't want to necessarily make decisions because we see that one number without understanding better why.
So, because that was my job in the past, I can tell you from history, that is what it averages. And parents, a lot of times it is parents, and their kids never ride the bus. So I feel like it would be great if we actually had, and of course the schools will hate me when I say this, but have the bus drivers actually take attendance. So we see who are the students who are on the bus and who are the students who are not on the bus, and then determine how we can do that, because the drivers know who their kids are. For the most part, they know who their kids are.
Yeah, and we're not recommending that we take any
Right.
action from this, but it just raises more questions.
Yep.
I also wonder if you could collect that,
Thank you,
You
Spencer.
could collect better, more specific data. Like, I'm just thinking selfishly about my daughter. There are certain days of the week that my husband can drive her to school, but then the other days she needs to take the bus. So could we, instead of just saying, do you need to take the bus ever, which basically is what we're saying.
So I don't know what's on the survey anymore that parents fill out.
It's just like, yes, no, do you? use
Yeah.
bus
Right.
In the morning and afternoon.
Right. And then I think what we were thinking more about is, right, because we understand that, yes, somebody might ride the bus 3 times a week. We get that. But it's that student who never rides the bus, but is signed up for the bus, right? Those are the things that, I mean, the biggest complaint about busing is that our buses are empty. A lot of the times, right? And we pay a lot of money. You know, it's like almost 1.5 for busing for the contract. So.
I mean, the difficulty about a bus route is that you can have a lot of kids on the bus route who don't ride, but a fair amount who do, and that's their only way of getting to school.
Correct.
And so it's kind of like the school building. You can have fewer students, but you still have the building, and you're not. I mean, what's more flexible about it is you can change the bus route from year to year if we can do that, if we get enough information of making routes shorter, or eliminating them altogether if there's no ridership. But if it's one person, I think we're obligated to provide that route or some other method.
And we always do. They
Yeah.
update them every year and
Yeah.
more than once a year too.
Yeah.
But I won't speak for Michelle, but
Yeah, just along with
Patrick.
what you're saying, Chris, another thing we talked about in the meeting and that we want to address in the future is some guidelines around the length of time that we're comfortable with kids being on the bus and the distance between the bus stops, the cluster stops that we have, and people's houses. So that'll all, if we can have longer conversations about those guidelines, then we can better build these bus routes to more serve the kids that need to use them or want to use them, and then maybe we can alter the language on the survey so we have a more a better idea of the ridership when we invest in the bus routes in the beginning of the year.
Okay. Natasha?
2 things. One, I just want to say is a single parent whose kid does not ride this bus every single day, but is marked down for mornings and afternoons. If the bus was not there, I would not be able to get my kid to school on days that I have to do certain things for my job, because I'm the only transportation. Second, the other thing I think just to make sure people consider is, you know, my son did the play, so even though he's marked down for the afternoon, he didn't ride the bus any afternoon during the course of Hadestown.
Those were things that we did.
So
take into
I'm just saying, just to,
consideration. Yeah.
keep in mind that there,
Nope,
during
'cause
sports,
there's
theater, all these
all
things.
those after, yes, we
there
thought
are
about
kids
all
who
of
are
those.
down,
That's
but
a different piece of it. It was more about, right, it will take time to look at those types of things, but it's just knowing, you know, the school knows who's in athletics or in the play or in any of those types of activities. But there are kids who sign up and never ride the bus. We have kids who sign up who have cars.
I'm not arguing that at all. I'm just saying, I just, again, as somebody who's already been impacted this year because of how transportation has changed, because my bus stop is now over 1.5 miles away from my house. And so that does impact my ability to get to work if I need to drop my kid off at the bus so he can get to school. I just want us to really be thoughtful and conscious of how important having bus transportation is for kids, even if it is a minimal amount of days a year. Because that could be the difference for a family.
Thank you. I think we got enough input for the Transportation Committee. Thank you for taking this on. We're going to move into approving our new teachers. We have a couple of things to do here. We're going to approve a new teacher, U32. We have one resignation. We had an extended leave of absence, but the only thing that did not make it here was that description of job that was sent to you guys later. So we want to approve that too. So I'm going to look into whoever is quickly in the personnel page, which I know is going to be Ursula, or is it you, Natasha, that you're on your computer?
I have a question about the job description that was sent to us.
Okay, so let's start with the new hire first. Let's do all of the personnel, and then we have people here that can talk about the job description so that we can hear. Everybody has one? Okay. All right, so Ursula, do you mind, or should I? Do you want to get started with the new hire? Whoever has it.
The,
New hire.
okay. So I move that we approve Jennifer Stanworth as U32 school nurse for the 24-25 school year.
Thank you. A second? Okay, thank you, Michelle. So Natasha, Michelle, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, welcome to Jennifer. Let's move to the resignation. Do you want to do it, Ursula or Natasha? Whoever, or anybody else?
I can keep doing it. I move that we approve the resignation of Lydia Fazy, East Montpelier nurse.
Second.
Okay, so Natasha and.
With appreciation.
With appreciation.
With
yeah.
appreciation.
All those in favor, please signify by saying yes.
Aye.
Sorry. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries.
And I move that we approve the extended leave of absence request from Annalisa Kirby, requesting extended leave of absence through the end of the 24-25 school year.
Second.
Okay, moved by Natasha, second by Michelle. All those in favor, please.
There's a
Oh,
que-
there's a question. Go, Diane.
What is the position?
She is a special educator,
At what school?
Berlin.
Any other questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Now I'll be looking for a motion to approve the job description, and then we can have some discussion. Could I have a motion to approve the job description for a community school coordinator? Ursula?
I move that we approve the job description for the WCUUSD Community School Coordinator.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Amelia. So moved by Ursula, second by Amelia. Do you get that, Lisa? Got it? Okay. Questions? Natasha?
Yes. I am curious as to why they are a non-bargaining, why the position is non-bargaining.
I'm looking to my HR director
HR
or
director
my
and-
principal.
Is,
So we don't have any other positions that are team leads in the district that are covered by the contract?
I don't think so.
So the way that this just is
Might need
Can you use the
mic.
mic, Becca?
Sorry.
Yeah, the way that, so the part of the reason that this is written in this particular way is that the community schools coordinator moving on into it's grant funded through the end of this fiscal year, and then with the potential for continued grant funding that would include potential supervision of after-school folks. And so that's why it's a not, does that kind of make sense? And I think that's written in
Yeah, it was written.
here. Does that make sense?
Supervisory
Hey,
response, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it says non-bargaining ESP. So, I mean, it's just, for it to be a non-bargaining ESP, but then they're supervising, potentially supervising.
Yeah, it's
I mean,
just-
It
it's,
says
It should be
does
just
not have
non-bargaining.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah,
okay.
sorry, that's what we're.
So ESP shouldn't be on there as contract type or wage,
That's exactly right. The
Yep.
ESP should be struck from
Yeah,
it.
sorry.
okay,
That makes more sense.
okay, thank you.
Patrick?
It also on, I think it's the third page, says that there's no supervisory responsibilities. Is that?
We would have to revise it if the funding is extended and there is supervisory, and then we would just bring that back to you as a revision. So starting off, does not have supervisory responsibilities. It could in the future, depending on the type of programming that we're funded for.
Okay, but then does that then get it out of the way to be bargaining position then?
No.
That's the grant issue, not the supervisory issue?
Yeah.
That is my understanding.
Okay.
And I'm going to constantly look back at you to make sure that I am saying the correct things.
Where did, go ahead, go ahead.
So this leads me, and I apologize for being in the weeds, but I do wonder if ESP does come back into it, because I do believe under negotiations, there's that one category that is non-bargaining, and it's ESP.
Right. About
I
4 or 5 positions, something like that.
I would lean on Heidi, on her expertise. So it is like this for a reason.
So there are 3 categories in the ESP contract, of which this fits under none of those. It's not an office manager, it is not a paraprofessional, or I'm missing the other category.
I didn't think it was a category. It was just a type of professionalism that fell into the ESP, but not into the already established categories. It seemed like it was a third category that
Didn't get covered under the agreement,
skill-based,
but was
more
still
skill-based,
ESP.
yeah, in terms of the contract. So it might be worthy to look into that a little bit more. The second, where's this funding coming from? And
Is it grant?
what grant?
Communities.
The grant.
The grant.
So the grant that the Community Schools Foundations grant, which is through the state of Vermont, there was under Act 67, and then what was renewed in the legislature, there was a set-aside grant of $1 million. We're one of 6 schools to receive $120,000 of that, that with a deadline of July 1, June 30th. Then, as a part of that grant process, there's braided funding with the University of Vermont to extend. They have not, to my knowledge, based on the last conversation I had with the community schools cohort, have not figured out exactly what that braiding looks like, which is why you see some ambiguity there, because we are looking to establish this, and then there will be changes, shifts over the next 2 years of the granting award that was awarded to UVM, that is in partnership with the AOE, that then is allotted to this particular community schools cohort.
As written now, this ends in June?
No.
With the hope that it
No, no.
extends? Or when does it start? When would this position start?
This would start now.
No.
Okay.
The GAN for the grant is already in place.
Okay, so if the grant's not extended, when does it end?
I'm gonna struggle with, there are 2 sources of funding.
Yeah.
They are braiding together.
Okay.
One of them I'm really clear about, and the other one nobody is clear about yet.
Okay.
And that just means we don't know the extent to which, but the intent is to fund for these 6 months and the next 2 years.
Okay. And then this is a site at U32 and no place else in the district?
No.
Or the district as a whole?
It is the district as a whole with, U32, sort of this hub and spoke model to build out what the
Okay.
model would actually look like.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, any other questions?
I am thrilled we're doing this. Let me just start with that. I've been a
ready.
proponent of community schools forever. When I have developed this in other places, they have been covered under the bargaining unit, and they have protections from the bargaining unit. And so I'm just concerned that we're bringing in a new position that right now is not supervising anybody, potentially based on language in here. If it's somebody who is licensed in something, they would, I would think in theory, fall under the teacher contract. I just want to make sure that we're not putting a position in place that could have the benefits of being protected by the contract and are not being protected by the contract. So I'm just trying to figure out why it was created the way it was without that. Again, all in favor of having it.
Yeah,
Just want to make sure that
I'm going to be really clear, because the only way that I've ever created this is in a non-bargaining
non-bargaining.
but I don't know this context well enough to know if that is even an option based on the way in which the grant is funded. It's also one of the things that has come up in other places is that it's there is no licensing for community school coordinator right now, and that has presented some obstacles in other places.
But
So
if you
I
hire
don't-
somebody who has a license, then they could fall into the teacher contract.
I'll
We
look
don't,
to
we
you
don't
all.
have all the answers. I would be lying if I had all the answers. This is how the grant people explain it to us. We're just trying to fit it in to be able to start it, and we need to post it like yesterday in order to get the person. I don't think it doesn't allow us to come back and change it if we want to change it later on, or if it comes in the need to change it. But I don't think I think for right now, the most important part, as we see it, is to approve the job description so that they can post it.
So just to that point, Fleur, is there a way to pull somebody into the bargaining agreement after they've been hired for a different position? Is that
Yes,
the
yeah,
process do?
we can
Okay.
change that when needed. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Otherwise, all those in favor of approving the job description, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. Okay.
Wait, there's
Yes.
abstain.
Oh, one abstention, okay. So one abstention, yeah. You got that, Lisa? One abstention, perfect, okay. Now we're gonna move right into approving the minutes and the board orders, if we can do it quickly so that we can move into executive session. Okay, a motion to approve the minutes of February 5th? Michaelan, thank you. Ursula? Michaelan? Yeah, you raised your hand. Okay, and second by Ursula. Any discussion? Seeing no hands, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. Okay, approve the board orders. Who's the lucky person with the folder? Okay, Daniel.
I move to approve the following board orders totaling $846,464.82 for the period January 23rd, 2025 to February 19th, 2025, $789,864.40. For the period January 23rd, 2025 to February 19th, 2025, $9,496.29. And also for the period January 23rd, 2025 to February 19th, 2025, $47,104.13.
Second.
Okay, so moved by Daniel, second by Ursula, by Diane.
Diane.
Any questions? I was seeing Ursula's hand up, so you have a question?
I didn't know she was second.
Oh, okay. All right. All those, no questions? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion carries. So now we are gonna move into our future agenda items really quickly. Just the board evaluation is gonna hit your mailbox, and please fill it. The advocating for the board, we talked about that. Superintendent evaluation, we can take it out. We're gonna do that. We're gonna do that tonight, because we are all so fresh and just trying to.
Thanks.
Sorry.
That's so encouraging.
It's gonna be quick because we are just like ready
we'll be
to. We'll be good. Yeah. Okay. Now I'm trying to find. Lisa, I sent it to you. Now my thing is going up and down and not letting me. You got the email. So we have two executive sessions today, but I'm gonna let public comment go first. I'm gonna skip board reflection, if that's okay with you guys, so we have a little more mind left for the executive session, and I see that we have one of our public members, a big fan of ours. Lila, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Actually, this isn't a comment, but it's a question that I think is really fast for Stephen. Is there really a coffee and conversation meeting at Doty tomorrow, since you are also scheduled to be testifying in the legislature at 9 o'clock?
Notice the loaded question. Let me just, I will be there for the, I can be there till 8:30. Yeah, very little no.
Get him some
So
coffee.
I will be there from 8 to 8:30, but I will have to leave by 8:30.
Okay, well, Alan and I would intend to go if you were going to be going, but we don't want you to make a special trip to do that. I guess that's the conundrum.
You might have trouble tomorrow finding a parking space in Montpelier. That's what I'm worried about.
Well,
So
I
he's saying it's
appreciate
more
your
important.
concern. So actually, why don't I just go ahead and say that I'm going to cancel the Doty piece, and then I'll reschedule to be out there as soon as possible.
Good idea.
Okay, we didn't want to have our signals crossed on it, but thank you. That's it.
Good luck in your testimony.
It was really a question, not a comment. Thanks.
Okay. Okay, everybody's, oh, Becca. Okay, just wait for the mic. Here it comes. With the mic.
Oh, yeah. Are there other people that go to that coffee besides those two folks? And how?
Yes.
How would we get the word out that you're not going to be there?
I'm actually sending a message to Gillian right now so she can notify.
I'm also going to post it on the local Worcester Facebook community
Thank you. I
group.
appreciate that.
And
I'm
Lila
doing it
will
right
get the
now.
word out too. Go ahead, Becca.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. A couple of things. One, I was thinking a lot about Patrick's point earlier about sort of the goal of our budget and really keeping kids at the center, right, and making sure that all kids have the resources they need to succeed. So I really appreciated you saying that. And I think that that's sort of at the top of the conversation about the state landscape as well. And sort of to echo what you were saying earlier, Flor, the governor's proposals around changing the education system don't address the cost drivers. They don't address the cliffs in our funding system. They don't address the inequities where low and moderate income residents are paying more than the richest Vermonters for our education. And so, you talked about things are moving quickly and there are a lot of resources out there. And as you know, public assets, this is what we do. We look at the data, we look at what's true, what's not true. So we have a new website, publicschoolsvt.org, which has a ton of FAQs, it has a ton of information about myths versus realities. And just, it's the charts. There are so many charts, and you'll want to look at them all. So I want to let you know about that. And I also want to let you know about a couple of events tomorrow. Maybe Stephen will stay in town. I don't know. There's an event at 1 at the State House in the Cedar Creek Room, trying to really put kids at the center of these conversations that are happening in Montpelier. And then on Tuesday the 25th, we're having a rally and sledding party to really, truly keep the focus on kids. That is who our public education system is about. It's actually not about taxpayers, right? The conversation has gotten a little derailed, I think. And I just want to help us all put the focus back on the kids and making sure that all of our kids have the resources they need to succeed. So I have, to that point, there are some pieces of information about the rallies. And so please take one, fill one out. There are some postcards that we're going to be delivering to the legislature later in the month or later in March. And there's information about the rallies. So I'll hand these out to folks, and I'd love it if you filled them out. And you can either hand them to anybody who lives in Middlesex or whoever. I'll get them back from you. But wanting to make sure that we're, in all of the work that we're doing, really not getting sort of lost in the weeds of thinking about this as a taxpayer thing and more about an education thing.
Okay. So with that, I don't see any other hands up, so I'm gonna close that part, and I'm gonna switch the executive session so we have more bandwidth for our superintendent. So let's start. So if we could have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of discussing the evaluation of the superintendent or their provision of Title I, Section 313 of Vermont statutes. So I didn't get a chance to send to you for the evaluation of a public officer or employee to include Stephen Dellinger Pate. He's going to wait a few minutes to join us, but he's then going to come, but so that we have it on the motion already.
So move.
Thank you, Diane. A second? Second by Michelle.
Will you
or
send me
Patrick.
that?
Yeah, Lisa has it. The minute I got it, I just had it. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing